You think you've escaped the noise. Then someone hands you a loudspeaker and calls it community. That sentence is what ran through my head the first time a red paper appeared under my windshield wiper. I still remember the exact weight of that paper, how the corner dug into my thumb as I slid it free. Little things stick to you. The smell of fresh paint, the creak of a new porch swing, the taste of the first coffee in a new mug, and that red paper joined the list in a heartbeat. My name is Jonah Ellis. I spent 20 years on the job, patrol nights, hostage rescues, and finally some years in the office dealing with people who'd make better enemies than friends. When I left, I told myself it was for good. I wanted quiet, a yard that didn't belong to the city, and a house that would let me stop carrying the echo of other people's worst days. That's why the first drive down Willow Lane felt like breathing underwater and then surfacing. The street curved gently between mature maples, dappled sunlight bounced off white picket fences and well-loved porches, and children's toys lay in yards exactly where they should, abandoned for a little while, waiting to be played with again. A neighbor watered his roses. A dog barked 2 houses down, friendly, not the kind that announces trouble. There was laundry on a line. There was life. The house was smaller than the one I'd lived in while I was a cop, in a good way. It had character, a crooked stair, a fireplace with a hearth built for evenings, a garage that smelled like sawdust and old motor oil. I could see myself there. I remember taking a photo of an old picture I had in my wallet, my grandfather, stern and proud in an army uniform, and setting it on the mantel. He taught me how to keep my hands steady and my head clear. He'd said, "A house is a quiet place if you let it be." I told myself I was finally following that advice. The early days were a slow, gentle pleasure. I unpacked boxes and labeled things like a man measuring parts of his life. One box read kitchen in sloppy marker. Another said papers, burn, with a smiley face my wife drew that I still didn't quite laugh at because she'd be there to explain it if she could. I made coffee in the mornings that tasted like a minor miracle. I met neighbors, a barista turned night shift nurse who loved old fishing stories, a retired math teacher who'd lived in the neighborhood for 40 years, and a guy named Tom 2 doors down who refused to ever part with his lawnmower because he said, "It keeps me honest." For 3 weeks, everything was exactly what I wanted. Normal, predictable, human. I mowed the lawn because it made me feel like I owned the day. I puttered around the garage, tightened a bolt on a shelf, and at night I slept without flinching at the slightest sound. It felt like I had finally found my place. Then a piece of red paper changed everything. I found it stuck under the wiper of my truck. Bold letters screamed, "Violation Notice." It said my grass was a 1/4 inch too tall and fined me $50. The language had that strange, shoveled tone of authority. Immediate compliance required. Further action pending. Someone had taken a printer and a legal-sounding font and made a hammer out of it. I laughed at first. I wanted to. That's what we do when things are small and ridiculous. We laugh and forget. But the laugh didn't last. The next morning there were 2 notices, then another. They became a pattern, a breadcrumb trail of spite. I went outside to throw away junk mail and saw her for the first time. Sharp features, thin hair pulled tight back, a clipboard clutched to her chest like a relic. Her dog, a yappy little thing, tugged her forward while she stared at my house. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She scribbled on that clipboard, looked at me for less than a second, and turned away. There was a look in her eyes I'd seen before in interrogation rooms and on parade grounds, the kind of satisfaction people get when they're wearing a role that makes them feel larger than they are. Tom from 2 doors down walked over with 2 mugs of coffee in his hands and an embarrassed grin. "They gave me one last month for leaving my gnome on display," he said, chuckling as if the whole thing was absurd. "Said it violated community aesthetic standards." "Who is they?" I asked. "The HOA president. Karina?" Karen? Van? Vance? Something like that. He didn't look worried. He laughed like it was a prank. But it wasn't a prank. Not when the notices started to carry words like lien attached to property and legal action pending. Not when a neighbor told me, in a voice small and tired, that they'd paid $200 to get someone to stop knocking on their door. People paid. They paid because fear is quicker than checking the records, and because sometimes it's the easiest path through an ugly moment. I didn't pay. That was a conscious choice, but it wasn't bravado. It was habit. My instincts told me to look for paper, not because paper is noble, but because paper tells the truth you can check. Forged documents fail when they meet the machine of records. County filings don't forgive bad grammar or a lack of legitimate history. So I drove down to the county clerk's office. It smells like toner, old coffee, and a kind of bureaucratic immortality. A woman with glasses on a chain and a patience that suggested she'd seen every kind of human stupidity looked up at me. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm looking for a registered homeowners association for Willow Lane, or something that covers my neighborhood." "Name's the Willow Lane Homeowners Association," I said, and slid one of the red notices across the counter. She typed, squinted, and typed again, fingers moving like a measured metronome. "Not under that name," she said finally, "or any similar name. We have no file." "Can you print me something that says that?" "Official. Stamped. I want it in writing." I felt like I was arming myself. Facts are armor. She raised an eyebrow but printed the report with a raised seal and a disdainful little smile like she'd done me a kindness by accepting a $25 fee. "You want 2 copies?" she asked. "3, I said. "1 for me, 1 for the attorney, and 1 for my files." Driving back, the paper said in my passenger seat like a challenge. I could have marched to the woman's door and dropped it on her porch like an accusation. I could have banged on her gate and made a spectacle. But the thing about people who build little kingdoms out of fear is they rarely stop at one stage. They changed names. They shuffled who made the notices. They found new ways to frighten people. Fixing her would have meant stopping one small thing without addressing all the others. That's how a weed regrows. You pop the stem instead of pulling the root. So I did what I always did when I wanted to be smart about a problem. I prepared. I called Rosa Mendoza, a lieutenant I still trusted like a muscle I could flex when needed. "This is Jonna," I said over the line. "I'm not on the clock, but I need someone to look into a pattern. Quiet, fingerprints in the margins." Rosa's voice had a short laugh in it. "You and your quiet plans," she said. "All right. Names, numbers. Keep it low for now." We had the sort of shorthand you only have with people you've trusted on bad nights. She promised discreet checks, and I set up small defenses at home. I put a tiny button mic into a shirt I like to wear, the kind you use for interviews, discreet, portable, and better than a phone left on a table. I put a couple of weatherproof cameras up under the eaves of the porch, ran them to an old server I kept in the garage, and made sure my phone would ping a handful of people with one simple tap. It felt strange to bring the job back into the house I'd bought to escape it, but sometimes the job is less about what you do and more about how you think. I wasn't planning to fight anyone in a way that would drag me back into the old life, but I also wasn't planning to be bullied. The house had to be my home and my vantage point both. Days passed, notices arrived with a slow, steady escalation. Language got sterner. One said a tax lien might be placed, a word that makes mouths in small towns fall quiet, because losing a house is more than just paper. It's a grave. My neighbors, the ones who had been kind and polite during the first few weeks, started to look tired. Mrs. Patel from across the street, who kept holiday lights up half the year because she loved the colors, came to my door with a stack of envelopes and a teary look. "She told me I was damaging property values," she whispered. "I paid. I felt so stupid." Her fingers trembled on the teacup she left in my hand. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake thinking about the way bullies gather momentum. They rely on people not asking questions. Over time, the pressure does the work for them. So I set a plan. Let the bully escalate until they reveal everything they are. Let their arrogance, their need for spectacle, and their small army of people who wanted to feel bigger do what they always do: make mistakes in public. I'm not proud of the calculation. It felt like using a mirror to force someone to look at who they were. And mirrors sometimes reveal things people will kill to hide. But I had a job to finish. Keep the neighborhood safe. Not safe from crime necessarily, but safe from fear that becomes policy. 2 weeks later, the car pulled up in front of my house. Dark windows, a pair of navy shirts who walked with a practice. The cuffs bit into my wrists as the two men shoved me into the back seat of a black SUV. The vinyl smelled of stale smoke and cheap cologne. The windows were tinted so dark I could barely see outside, just shadows of my neighbors gathering at the curb. I caught one last glimpse of Tom, standing frozen with pruning shears in his hands, and Mrs. Patel clutching her shawl, her mouth open like she wanted to shout but couldn't. The taller of the two fake cops slid into the passenger seat. The driver started the engine with a low growl. The woman with the clipboard, Karen, climbed in last, settling beside me as if she had earned the right to sit there. Her perfume was sharp, like overripe lilies, and her lips curved in a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Well, Mr. Ellis," she said, flipping a page on her clipboard, "it seems you're not a very good neighbor." I leaned back against the seat, wrists tight behind me, my voice steady. "Funny, I thought neighbors waved and borrowed sugar, not printed fake warrants." Her smile faltered for half a second, then snapped back. "You'll find this is all very real. Refuse to comply, and we escalate. Simple as that." The passenger turned halfway to face me. He had a scar down his jaw, the kind that told stories of fights he probably didn't win. His voice was rough. "Best keep your mouth shut. This can go easy or it can go hard." I chuckled softly. "That's the line they teach you in fake cop school? Because I've heard the real version, and it doesn't sound like that." The driver snorted, but the scarred one glared at him until the amusement died. Inside, my pulse was steady. 20 years in law enforcement teaches you not to burn energy panicking. But I was angry, not the loud, shouting kind, the cold, deep kind that hums under your skin. They thought they were in control, thought the cuffs and the car and the show of authority would break me. They didn't know I had already pressed the alert on my ring. Rosa would be getting the ping. She'd know it wasn't a false alarm because I never used it unless the ground was about to split open. The SUV rolled through the neighborhood, slow enough that anyone watching would see me in the back seat. A perp walk, just like I suspected. A message to every homeowner on Willow Lane. This is what happens when you resist. I caught Duke standing at his fence, phone raised. "Good man." I gave him the smallest nod, a signal I hoped he understood. "Keep filming. Don't interfere." Karen leaned toward me, lowering her voice like we were conspirators instead of adversaries. "You could make this easier, Jonah. Pay the fines, sign the agreement, and you'll never see us again." I turned my head, meeting her eyes. "There's no us, Karen. There's just you, a woman hiding behind a clipboard and two rent-a-thugs. And let me guess, the money doesn't go to the neighborhood. It goes straight into that shell company of yours." Her face froze, just for a heartbeat. Then she barked a laugh. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know," I said. "County clerk's office didn't have a single record of your little HOA, but they had records of you and your LLC. Rosa's probably pulling the rest of it as we speak." That rattled her. She masked it quickly, but I saw the tightness in her jaw, the flicker in her eyes. The scarred man grunted. "Boss, maybe we should—" "Shut up and drive," she snapped at the driver, cutting him off before he finished. I sat back, letting the silence stretch. That's the thing about bullies. They can't stand silence. It makes them hear their own thoughts. We left the neighborhood and turned onto a county road. Fields stretched wide, corn swaying under the wind like waves. The SUV bumped over potholes, rattling the loose panel near my knee. My wrists ached, but I tested the cuffs with small movements, feeling for play. They'd used cheap ones, not department issue. A thin pin could snap them given time. I glanced at Karen. "Where are we going? Or do you just plan to drive me in circles until I pay your fake ticket?" She didn't answer. Instead, she shuffled papers on her clipboard, deliberately ignoring me. So I turned to the scarred man. "What's your cut? 10%? 20? You get to rough people up if they don't pay? Or does Karen here just let you feel like a cop for an afternoon?" His jaw clenched. I saw the way his fists tightened on his knees. Good. I wanted him angry. Angry people make mistakes. The driver cleared his throat. "Boss, we're on county roads now. Lot of cameras at intersections if we keep going this way." She snapped her head toward him. "Then take the back roads. I don't care how long it takes." I smiled. "See, that's your problem. Real cops don't avoid cameras. They invite them. Cameras prove the case. Cameras are accountability." I leaned closer. "You're terrified of accountability." She whipped her head toward me, eyes blazing. "You think you're clever. You think you can expose me, but you're just one man. And this neighborhood already belongs to me." I tilted my head, calm as ever. Not for long. The SUV slowed, then turned down a gravel path that cut between two overgrown fields. Dust rose behind us, filling the air with grit. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. This was escalation. I shifted slightly, letting my shoulder brush the panel near my knee. Loose plastic flexed under the pressure. If I could pop it free, I might find wiring I could use, maybe even a sharp edge. But before I could test it again, Karen's phone buzzed. She snatched it up, eyes narrowing at the screen. "What?" she snapped. I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but I could guess. Someone warning her, maybe about the neighbors filming, maybe about the DA's office sniffing around. Her knuckles whitened around the phone. "Handle it," she hissed. Then she hung up and glared at me. "You think you're safe because you've got friends on the force, but even they can't touch me if no one finds you." The scarred man smirked. We could make him disappear real easy. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with clarity. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about control, and Karen was willing to cross lines she hadn't before. I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "You really want to go down this road? Because once you cross that line, there's no turning back, and I promise you, I'll drag you with me every inch of the way." For a moment, nobody spoke. The engine hummed, tires crunched gravel, and the air between us grew heavy. Then Karen laughed, sharp and cold. "You think you're the hero of this story, Jonah, but heroes don't win in the real world. People like me do." I smiled faintly. Funny thing about heroes, they don't need to win every battle. They just need to win the last one. The SUV jerked to a stop near an abandoned barn, its paint peeling, windows shattered. Birds scattered from the roof, squawking into the gray sky. The driver cut the engine. "Here?" he asked nervously. Karen nodded. "Here." The scarred man yanked me out of the car, shoving me toward the barn. My boots crunched on gravel, wrists screaming from the cuffs. Inside, the air was damp, filled with the scent of mold and rot. Broken boards littered the ground. A rusted tractor sat in the corner like a forgotten relic. Karen followed us in, her heels clicking on the boards. "This is where you learn, Mr. Ellis. This is where you understand that resisting me has consequences." I chuckled low. "You brought me to a barn in the middle of nowhere? What's next? Tie me to the tractor and twirl your mustache?" The scarred man shoved me against a beam, face inches from mine. "You think this is funny?" I stared into his eyes, unblinking. "I think you're scared. That's what's funny." He raised a fist, but Karen snapped, "Not yet." Her voice cracked like a whip. "We do this my way." That was when I heard it, a faint hum in my ear, so quiet I almost thought I imagined it. The mic in my shirt still transmitting, which meant Rosa was listening, which meant backup wasn't far. I straightened up, looking Karen dead in the eye. "You've made a mistake, because every word you're saying right now isn't just between us. It's being recorded, and soon the whole county's going to hear it." Her face drained of color. "You're bluffing." I smiled. "Am I?" The scarred man hesitated, fist still raised. The driver shifted nervously by the door. The air was thick, tension snapping like stretched wire. And that was the moment I knew the tide was turning. They just didn't realize it yet. The scarred man's fist hung in the air, trembling with the weight of decision. I could almost hear his pulse in the silence, see the calculation in his eyes. If he swung, he'd cross a line he couldn't uncross. If he didn't, he'd look weak in front of Karen. Karen hissed, "Do it!" Her voice cracked like glass shattering. But the driver shifted at the doorway, voice low and nervous. "Boss, this ain't what I signed up for. You said we were just scaring people into paying. This," he gestured around the barn with shaky hands, "this is something else." Karen spun on him, fury radiating from her thin frame. "Shut up! You'll do as you're told or you'll get nothing." I seized the moment. "Listen to him," I said, locking eyes with the driver. "You know this isn't right. You know the second you step over that line, you're not just some guy doing a job. You're a criminal. And trust me, I've seen where that road ends." The scarred man snarled, lowering his fist, but shoving me harder against the beam. "You don't get to talk, old man." I leaned forward despite the pressure, my voice calm but sharp. "I'm not just talking to you. I'm talking to the decent part of you that's buried under all that scar tissue. You're following someone who's never going to protect you when this falls apart. And it will fall apart." Karen screeched, "Enough!" Her voice clicked across the floorboards as she stormed closer, clipboard clutched like a weapon. "You think you're clever, Jonah? You think anyone's listening? No one cares. No one's coming. Out here, you're nothing." I smiled slowly, letting her see the confidence in my eyes. Funny thing about nothing, it has a way of echoing. And right now, every word out of your mouth is bouncing off a microphone and landing straight in the ears of people who very much care. Her face blanched. Just for a heartbeat, the mask slipped, fear glimmering through. The driver's eyes darted between us. "Wait, what's he talking about?" Karen snapped, "He's bluffing." "Am I?" I said, leaning back against the beam. "Go ahead. Hit me. Threaten me again. Make sure the whole county hears just how official you are." The scarred man hesitated, fist trembling again. He muttered, "Boss, what if he ain't bluffing?" Karen whirled on him, spitting venom. "You useless coward. He's just trying to divide us." The driver stepped back, shaking his head. "No, he's right. We shouldn't be here." He reached for the barn door and he disappeared into the daylight. I tilted my head at the scared man. "That's one gone. How long do you realize you're on the losing team too?" Karen's eyes blazed with desperation. She shoved the clipboard into the scarred man's chest. "Do it! Make him shut up!" The man hesitated again. I saw it, the crack in his resolve, and I pressed into it. "You think she's going to protect you?" I asked, voice steady. "Look at her. She doesn't see you as a partner. You're just muscle to her. When this blows up, and it will, she'll throw you under the bus to save herself. I guarantee it." "Shut up," Karen screeched, her voice breaking. She turned back to the scarred man, her command desperate now. "He's nothing. Hit him." The man's jaw clenched, his fist lowered. "No," he muttered.
Karen froze. "What?" He threw the clipboard onto the ground, papers scattering like broken feathers. I said, "No, I didn't sign up to bury anyone. I just wanted a paycheck. This is crazy." Karen's face twisted into a mask of rage. "You pathetic coward." She shoved him with both hands. "Fine, I'll do it myself." She lunged at me, nails clawed like talons, but I pivoted sideways. My shoulder slammed into her chest, knocking her off balance. She stumbled back, shrieking as her heel caught on a broken board. She went down hard, the clipboard clattering to the ground again. The scarred man looked at me, then at her. His face was a war of conflict, loyalty, fear, and the dawning realization that he was in too deep. "Run," I said to him quietly. "If you're smart, you'll walk out that door now. Tell the cops everything. Save yourself while you can." For a long second, he didn't move. Then, without a word, he turned and followed the driver out into the daylight. That left me and Karen. She scrambled to her feet, fury twisting her face. "You think this is over?" she spat. "You have no idea who I am. You can't stop me." I stepped forward, close enough that she had to crane her neck to glare up at me. "Oh, I know exactly who you are. You're a bully with a clipboard, and bullies always think they're untouchable until the moment they're not." Her hand darted into her pocket. For just a split second, I thought she was reaching for pepper spray or a knife. Instead, she yanked out her phone. Her thumb flew over the screen as she shouted, "You'll regret this! I'll ruin you!" I tilted my head, calm. "Karen, you're already ruining yourself. Every word you're saying, it's recorded. Every threat, every scheme, every scam, you've been broadcasting your own confession." Her face went pale. "You're lying." "Am I?" I asked, echoing my earlier words. And then from outside the barn came the sound of tires crunching gravel, multiple vehicles, doors slamming, and a familiar voice amplified by a megaphone. "This is Lieutenant Rosa Menendez of the County Sheriff's Department. Step out with your hands up." Karen's eyes went wide. She dropped the phone. For the first time, real fear overtook her face. I smiled faintly. "Told you." The barn filled with shouts and heavy boots as deputies poured in. Rosa was at the front, weapon drawn, eyes sharp. When she saw me, cuffed but standing tall, relief flickered across her face. "Jonah," she said. "You all right?" "Never better," I said, "though I wouldn't mind getting these cuffs off." She signaled to a deputy, who quickly unlocked them. The weight fell away, leaving my wrists raw but free. Karen tried to bolt for the side door, but two deputies tackled her before she made it 3 steps. She screamed, kicked, cursed, but it was useless. As they hauled her up, Rosa looked at me. "We've been listening since the moment you pressed that ring. Every word, solid gold evidence." I nodded. "Good, because the neighborhood deserves to hear exactly who's been terrorizing them." Karen spat at me as they dragged her past. "You think you've won, Ellis? You haven't. I'll be out in no time." I met her glare, calm and steady. "Maybe, but even if you get out, you'll never own this neighborhood again. That's over." Her screams echoed in the barn as they dragged her out. Outside, neighbors had gathered at a distance, whispering, filming, watching as the deputies stuffed Karen into the back of a squad car. The scarred man and the driver were already cuffed in another car, their faces pale with shock. Tom approached me slowly, still holding his phone. "Jonah, was that really happening? The HOA was fake?" I clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Yeah, it was all a scam, and it's over now." Mrs. Patel stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I was the only one. I paid them so much money." I shook my head. "You weren't the only one, but you won't have to pay another dime, not anymore." That night, after the deputies left and the barn was quiet again, I sat on my porch. The air smelled of rain, the neighborhood hushed, but alive with whispers behind curtains. My wrists ached, but my heart was steady. I thought of my grandfather's words again. A house is a quiet place if you let it be. I smiled faintly. Guess I still had to fight for that quiet, Grandpa. But it was worth it. Because now Willow Lane belonged to the neighbors again, not to a bully with a clipboard. And that was a victory worth every scar.
The morning after the barn raid, Willow Lane didn't wake up the same. You could feel it in the air. It was quieter, yes, but not the calm quiet I'd first fallen in love with. This was a heavy, watchful silence, the kind that hangs over a place after a storm has ripped through. Curtains were drawn longer than usual, and neighbors lingered on porches with coffee mugs they weren't drinking from. Everyone had questions, but no one knew who to ask. And I sat on my porch swing, bandages on my wrists, coffee steaming in my hand, waiting for the questions to come. They didn't take long. Tom was the first. He walked up slow, like a man approaching a campfire he wasn't sure would burn him. "Yona," he said, clearing his throat, "mind if I sit?" "Of course," I said, gesturing to the other chair. He sat, rubbing his palms on his jeans. I don't even know where to start. That woman, Karen or whatever her name is, she wasn't real HOA? Not even close, I said. I sipped my coffee, letting him take it in. No filings, no board, no authority, just smoke and mirrors. She preyed on fear and the fact that most people don't bother to check the records. Tom leaned back, exhaling hard. I knew it felt wrong, but when they put those notices in your mailbox, you don't want to be the odd man out. You pay. You hope it goes away. Exactly, I said. And she counted on that. She used people's desire for peace against them. Tom nodded slowly. Well, not anymore. His voice grew firmer. Not after what everyone saw yesterday. By noon, more neighbors had gathered. Mrs. Patel came with trembling hands clutching an envelope. "This is what I paid," she whispered, voice breaking. $300 for nothing." I took the envelope gently. "You'll get it back. Once the investigation's through, the DA will make sure restitution's part of the case." Her eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," I said. "You weren't the only one, Mrs. Patel. Dozens of people paid her. You're not alone." That sentence, "you're not alone," spread through the crowd like sunlight breaking clouds. People murmured, shoulders loosened. They'd all carried their shame in silence, thinking they were the only fools. Now they realized the truth. They'd been victims of the same predator. That evening, Rosa stopped by. She stood on my porch in uniform, her expression equal parts tired and satisfied. "You sure know how to make retirement interesting," she said with a wry smile. I chuckled. "Glad to keep you busy." She handed me a folder. "Thought you want to see this. Preliminary reports. Karen's Shell LLC pulled in almost $50,000 over the past year from this neighborhood alone. She had accomplices, but you scared 2 of them off before they could dig in deeper." I flipped through the papers. Numbers, bank transfers, fake invoices, the anatomy of a scam. She built herself a little empire. Rosa nodded. An empire built on fear. But now, it's rubble. She paused, her eyes softening. "Jonah, you okay? Really?" I leaned back in the chair, staring out at the street where kids were finally riding bikes again, their parents watching from the porch. "I'm okay," I said. "Just tired. Tired of fighting. I came here for peace, Rosa, and somehow trouble found me anyway." She placed a hand on my shoulder.
Sometimes peace has to be fought for first. You did that. Don't forget it. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal motions, depositions, and whispered conversations on porches. The district attorney moved fast, faster than I'd ever seen in a case like this. Karen had left a trail a rookie could follow. Fake notices, bank accounts in her name, even emails bragging to her accomplices. The trial was set within 2 months. Walking into the courthouse that morning, I felt the old weight settle on my shoulders, the weight of being under the public's eye. Except this time, I wasn't there as a cop. I was there as a neighbor, a witness, and the man who'd pressed the button that ended her reign. The courtroom buzzed with quiet energy. Rows of neighbors sat together, some clutching documents, others simply watching, with wide, hopeful eyes. Mrs. Patel was there, Tom too, and even Duke, big as life, wearing his grass-stained cap like a badge of honor. Karen sat at the defense table looking smaller than I remembered. Gone was the smug clipboard queen. Her hair was frizzed, her eyes darting nervously. She wore a cheap suit that didn't quite fit, and for the first time she looked like what she really was, a con artist caught in her own web. The prosecutor stood tall, voice steady. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about trust. It's about a woman who manipulated her neighbors, stole their money, and tried to enforce authority she never had. She built fear into fines and called it law. But the law, the real law, doesn't bend to bullies. Karen's attorney tried to fight back, spinning tales of miscommunication and misunderstanding. She painted her as a woman simply trying to organize the community. But each witness tore holes in that story. Mrs. Patel's trembling voice, she said if I didn't pay, they'd take my house. I believed her. Tom's firm tone, I got a fine for a lawn gnome. A gnome! That's not law, that's nonsense. Duke's booming laugh filling the courtroom. She threatened me over my grass clippings, so I filmed her. Want to see the video? And then came me. I stood, hands clasped behind my back, and told my story. I described the red notices, the fake warrant, the abduction to the barn. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. The truth was dramatic enough. Karen squirmed in her seat as I spoke, her eyes darting anywhere but toward me. The prosecutor finished with the recordings. Every word she'd spat in that barn, every threat, every declaration that the neighborhood belonged to her. The jury listened with wide eyes, the weight of proof undeniable. After 3 days, the verdict came back. Guilty on all counts: fraud, extortion, kidnapping, impersonating law enforcement. The judge's words rang through the courtroom. You sought to rule through fear. Today, that ends. This community belongs not to you, but to the people who live in it. Neighbors erupted into quiet cheers, tears of relief, hugs shared between people who'd barely spoken before. A community fractured by fear was knitting itself back together right before my eyes. Karen was led away in cuffs screaming about appeals, about revenge, about how she'd be back. But her voice was swallowed by the sound of neighbors standing taller, freer than they had in months. That night we gathered on Willow Lane. Not a meeting, not an official assembly, just neighbors. Mrs. Patel brought samosas. Tom grilled burgers. Duke poured beer into plastic cups. Kids ran under the streetlights, laughter echoing through the air. I sat on my porch, watching, listening. For the first time since I'd moved here, the streets sounded like home. Tom walked over, handing me a burger. You did this, Yona, he said quietly. You gave us our street back. I shook my head. No, we did it. All of us. I just pressed the first domino. Mrs. Patel smiled through her tears. You reminded us we weren't alone. I raised my cup, looking at the circle of neighbors who'd gone from strangers to something more. "To Willow Lane," I said. They echoed it back, voices full of pride. "To Willow Lane." Later, when the crowd thinned and the night grew quiet, I sat alone under the stars. The porch swing creaked softly. I thought about Karen, about the scarred man, about the driver who'd walked away. I thought about the way fear can twist ordinary people into accomplices. And I thought about the strength it takes for neighbors to stand together even when shame makes them hide. "Peace isn't free," I murmured to myself. "It's fought for, earned, protected." My grandfather's voice echoed in my memory. "A house is a quiet place if you let it be." And now, finally, it was.
The trial had ended. Karen was gone, convicted and sent to prison. For the first time since moving to Willow Lane, I thought I had finally earned the right to rest. For weeks, the neighborhood felt lighter. Kids laughed louder, parents stopped looking over their shoulders, and front yards bloomed with pride instead of fear. Every barbecue felt like a small celebration of freedom. And I told myself I could finally let my guard down. But peace has a way of lulling you right before the next blow lands. It was a Thursday evening, late enough that the sky was heavy with rain clouds. I was on my porch swing, listening to the drizzle tap against the gutters, the air rich with the smell of wet earth. For once, I wasn't thinking about Karen. I wasn't thinking about fake notices or the barn. I was just reading. That's when I heard it. 3 knocks, even, deliberate. Not a neighborly knock, not someone asking for sugar or offering pie. No, this was the kind of knock that carried weight. My instincts fired instantly. I set my book down and rose, every sense sharpened. My hand brushed against the inside of the doorframe, where I kept more than just a flashlight. I opened the door, and there he was, the scarred man. Rain streaked down his face, soaking his jacket. He looked thinner, more worn, like the weeks had eaten away at him. His eyes, once hard and cruel in that barn, now carried something else. Fear. "Jonah," he said, voice hoarse, "I need to talk." My jaw tightened. "You've got a hell of a nerve showing up here." "I know," he said quickly, glancing over his shoulder. "I don't deserve your time, but I didn't know she'd take it that far. I swear I didn't." I folded my arms, blocking the doorway. "You were there. You cuffed me. You dragged me into that barn. Don't stand here pretending you were innocent." His shoulders sagged. "I walked away. I didn't touch you after that. You know I didn't. And I'm here because it's not over." Those words cut through me like a knife. I stepped out onto the porch, lowering my voice. "What do you mean, not over?" "She's still running things," he whispered. "From prison. She's got people outside, people worse than me, real criminals. She promised them money, power, control of the neighborhood. They're still moving, even without her." My gut tightened. "She's locked up. How much power can she have?" He shook his head. "You don't understand. She planned for this. She said once if she ever went down, someone else would take over. She called it her insurance, said the neighborhood was her investment, and she wasn't letting it go." The rain picked up, drumming hard against the roof. I narrowed my eyes. "Why tell me this? Why risk coming here?" His voice cracked. "Because I can't sleep. Because I can't carry it anymore. I thought it was just a scam, easy money. But Karen's not done. And if you don't stop what's coming, she'll destroy you, and maybe everyone else too." Before I could reply, headlights swept across the street. A black sedan rolled by slowly, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. It didn't stop, not yet, but it slowed enough to make my blood run cold. The scarred man stiffened, his breath hitched. "That's them. They found me." The SED idled at the end of the block,
taillights glowing like watchful eyes. "Inside," I said. He hesitated, but I shoved the door open wider. "Now." He slipped inside, dripping water onto the floor. I locked the door behind him and peeked out the curtain. The SED was still there, waiting. "Who's in the car?" I asked. He swallowed. "One of hers. They called him Red. Big guy, ex-con. She trusted him more than anyone." As if summoned, the knock came again, this time louder, heavier. The scarred man whispered, "It's him." I nodded slowly, heart steady but pounding deep in my chest. "Stay here," I said. He started to, "No!" but I was already walking toward the door. I opened it, and there stood Red. He was enormous, 6'4" at least, shoulders like a wall, red beard dripping with rain. His eyes burned with cold confidence. "You Jonah Ellis?" his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Who's asking?" I said evenly. He grinned, teeth yellow in the porch light. "Name's Red. I'm here to finish what Karen started." Before I could respond, he shoved forward, barging into the house like a storm. The scarred man tried to block him, but Red swung one massive arm, sending him sprawling across the table with a crash. I squared up, fists clenched. Red loomed over me, rainwater dripping on my floorboards. He said, "Hello." I forced a grim smile. "Then tell her I said goodbye." And I pressed the button on my ring. Red didn't notice, not yet. He lunged, throwing a punch the size of a sledgehammer. I ducked, feeling the rush of air as it missed my head by inches and splintered the doorframe. I countered, driving my fist into his ribs. Pain shot up my knuckles. The man was built like concrete, but he grunted, stumbling a half step. The scarred man staggered up, clutching his ribs. "Red, stop! This isn't what we—" Red grabbed him by the collar and hurled him into the wall like a rag doll. He crumpled to the floor, groaning. Now it was just me and the giant. We circled in the living room, rain pounding outside, the clock ticking loud on the wall. "You should have stayed quiet," Red snarled. "Karen warned me you were trouble." I kept my voice steady. Karen always did underestimate people. He roared and charged. I sidestepped, grabbing the lamp off the table and smashing it across his back. The lamp shattered, pieces skittering across the floor. Red staggered but didn't go down. Instead, he turned, eyes blazing. "That's all you got, old man?" "Not even close," I said. He lunged again, but this time I met him head-on. My shoulder slammed into his gut, driving him back against the wall. The impact rattled the pictures hanging there, one crashing to the ground. He swung a wild punch. It caught my cheek, exploding pain across my face. I tasted blood, but pain never stopped me before. I drove my knee into his thigh, hard, then shoved him toward the kitchen. He stumbled, crashing into the counter, sending dishes flying. The scarred man groaned from the floor. "Jonah!" I barked, never taking my eyes off Red. Red grinned, through the blood now dripping from his nose. "You fight good for a has-been, but I don't lose." I steadied my stance. Everyone loses eventually. And then the sirens wailed. Red's head snapped toward the window, realization dawning too late. "You set me up," he snarled. "No," I said, chest heaving. "You set yourself up." Red lunged one last time, desperate. I sidestepped and hooked my arm around his neck, dragging him off balance. We crashed to the floor, wrestling amid the broken glass and rainwater. He was stronger, but I was meaner, and I knew how to hold out until backup arrived. The front door burst open, deputies flooding in, weapons raised. "Hands where we can see them!" Red roared, struggling, but half a dozen officers piled on, pinning his massive frame to the ground. The floor shook with the weight of the struggle, but within moments they had him cuffed and hauled upright. He spit blood onto my rug and growled, "She'll never stop! Karen owns this neighborhood!" I wiped blood from my lip and met his glare. Not anymore. They dragged him out into the rain. The scarred man sat slumped against the wall, clutching his ribs, eyes wide. "You saved me," he whispered. I shook my head. "You saved yourself. You came here." His eyes filled with something like shame and relief. Later that night, after statements were given and the squad cars rolled away, I sat back on my porch swing. My face throbbed, my knuckles ached, but the air smelled clean again, rain-washed, pure. I thought of Karen, scheming from her cell, of Red, now in chains, of the scarred man finally breaking free of her grip, and I realized something. Peace isn't a gift you receive. It's a fight you choose again and again. And if Karen or anyone else ever tried to take it from me again, well, I'd be ready.
The house was still standing. That might sound like a strange way to begin, but after everything that had happened, the fake notices, the barn, the trial, the fight with Red, there was a part of me that half expected to wake up one morning and find nothing but ashes where my porch used to be. Instead, the house was there, solid, waiting. And for the first time in months, I could sit on the swing without wondering who was coming down the street with bad intentions. The cicadas hummed in the trees. The air smelled of cut grass. A dog barked lazily 2 houses over. Life, ordinary and precious, had returned. But inside me, the echoes of the storm still lingered. Neighbors came by more often now, not with complaints or worried whispers, but with stories, food, laughter. Mrs. Patel brought samosas every other Sunday. Tom installed a fire pit in his front yard and declared every Friday block night, where the whole street gathered to roast marshmallows and tell stories. Duke started a small neighborhood watch, not because we feared another Karen, but because we'd learned the value of watching out for each other. It wasn't just a street anymore. It was a family. One evening, as the fire pit glowed and kids toasted marshmallows, Tom leaned toward me. "You know," he said, "if you hadn't fought back, she'd still be running this street." I shook my head. If I hadn't fought back, someone else would have eventually. People get tired of living under fear. "Maybe," he said, smiling, "but you showed us how." For weeks, I let myself believe it was over. But one night, sitting alone on my porch, I got a letter. No return address, just my name scrawled across the front. I turned it over in my hands, my pulse quickening. Slowly, I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper. 4 words. "This isn't the end." No signature. I sat there, staring at the words. Was it from Karen? From someone loyal to her? From Red, somehow? Or was it just a cruel prank? Someone in the county jail trying to stir fear for the fun of it? I didn't know. And maybe that was the point. Fear thrives on uncertainty. I folded the letter, slid it into the drawer of my desk, and locked it away. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I refused to let it take root. The truth is, Karen may be gone, but there will always be another Karen somewhere. Another bully, another fraud, another person who thrives on fear. That's the hardest lesson I had to learn. Peace isn't permanent. It's fragile, always tested. But it's worth fighting for. Every single time. One night, weeks later, I found myself walking the street at dusk. Porch lights blinked on one by one, kids were called inside for dinner, and the air buzzed with that perfect mixture of ordinary sounds, dishes clattering, TVs murmuring, dogs barking. I stopped in the middle of the block,
hands in my pockets, and looked around. This was the neighborhood I had wanted when I first arrived. Not perfect, not flawless, but real. A place where people waved, borrowed sugar, laughed at lawn gnomes, and sat around fire pits swapping stories. A place where fear had lost its grip. And maybe, just maybe, a place where I could finally rest. I thought of my grandfather again, his stern face in that old black and white photo. His words echoed in my memory. A house is a quiet place if you let it be. For the first time, I understood what he meant. Quiet isn't just the absence of noise. Quiet is safety. Quiet is trust. Quiet is knowing your neighbors stand beside you, not against you. Quiet is peace earned. So, if you ask me what I learned from all of this, here it is. Bullies will always exist. Fear will always try to creep in, and people like Karen will always try to convince you they're bigger than they are. But they only win if you let them. Because when ordinary people stand together, when neighbors stop whispering and start speaking, fear doesn't stand a chance. That's what happened here on Willow Lane. And if it ever happens again, I know what to do. Because peace isn't just something you find. It's something you fight for. Something you protect. Something you keep. Always.